So, welcome to today's topic, helping boys who get angry and fight, practical tools for taking charge of their firepower. We will have an hour with Peter Fraenkel about today, and there will be time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, or in the chat. I will be monitoring both. My name is Melissa Tandy. I'm the Director of Community and International Training at Ackerman Institute for the Family, and I'm so thankful to have Peter Fraenkel with us today. Peter is Associate Professor of Psychology at City College of New York and former faculty at the Ackerman Institute for the Family and NYU Medical Center. He currently has a private practice in New York City. He has published on a wide range of topics, including his two books, Last Chance Couple Therapy, Bringing Relationships Back from the Brink, and Sync Your Relationship, Save Your Marriage, 4 Steps to Getting Back on Track. He's also an excellent musician and singer, and I hope all of that you will see today. So thank you so much for presenting today, Peter.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you very much for having me. And hello, everyone. It's always a little bit odd to not see anybody, but I know you're out there. I try to pretend that I'm like Mr. Rogers, and saying, hello, children. Today we're going to the Magic Kingdom. Must have been, that's why he probably had all those sessions too with actual kids in the audience. Anyway, this is a topic that I've been interested in since being a graduate student at Duke University. Where I had a young, low-income white boy who was getting into lots of fights at school. His mom, he was just single mother, and at that time, interestingly, at Duke, there was no family therapy course, so I was mostly saying, I'll call him Ronnie, individually. And, Duke at that time was a psychodynamically oriented training program. And I was doing, play therapy with little toy soldiers and, with the idea that we're going to help him express his angry feelings and his frustrations and, kind of, quote, get the feelings out. And my supervisor thought I was doing, marvelous play therapy, and nothing was changing. Ronnie was still going to school. Kids would start to pick on him, and then he would come back, guns blazing, and hit somebody, and then he would be the one sent to the vice principal's office. So I thought, this kind of play therapy stuff only is useful to understand some of the feelings, but really was not offering a different frame and a way of thinking and some tools for Ronnie in terms of handling these moments with other kids. And so I started thinking about one of the concepts in family therapy that is very powerful is the notion of a reframe, where essentially what we're doing is taking a situation and changing a person's understanding of the nature of the relationship. So in the moment when a kid or teen, I'm going to say kids and teens, but just to save time, I might just say kids, but I also mean teenagers, feels provoked, bullied, teased, engaged into, conflict, there's often a sort of sense that they take charge of the situation by being physical and hitting somebody and getting aggressive in these ways. But a different way of thinking about it is that other kids know how to metaphorically pull your strings. And so I just happened to have, at that time, and I've saved him all these years, a puppet. Some of you may know this character. It's an Australian TV show, old one, called Banana in Pajamas. And perfect for illustrating something to Ronnie. I said, Ronnie, it's an interesting thing. Do you know what a marionette is? He said, no. Southern accent says, no, Durham, North Carolina. He said, no, I don't. I said, well, it's this puppet. And I brought out banana pajamas. I said, the marionette puppeteer is moving the strings. If the puppeteer wants banana to push his fists out, he can do it like that, or get his feet moving. Never was too good with this puppet with that. And it's kind of like these kids know how to pull your strings. They know how to get you to fight. And they know that if you start fighting, you're the one who's going to end up in the principal's office. You're the one who's going to, as has happened already, get ejected from school for a bit. Do you ever think about that? He looked at me like, oh, no, I never thought about it that way. I said, yeah, it's an interesting thing. And then I pulled out another prop with kids and adults. Props can be very helpful. I had this dartboard. I said, here's another way to think about it. It's almost like, you ever seen one of these? He said, yeah, I've seen it, but I don't really know what you do with it. So, well, it's a dartboard, and, you throw darts, try to get to the middle. That's the bullseye. And it's kind of like, again, those kids, it's like you're wearing a dartboard on your front and on your back. And these kids know how to hit the bullseye, meaning they know how to get you going. And what is it that they need to say to get you out there fighting and getting into trouble? He said, anytime they say anything like your mama, that's it. I come out fighting. I said, that's right. So they have learned to take charge of your firepower. And your firepower is important. Like, we don't want to get rid of that. Like, it's important for boys, girls, any kid to have some strength and be able to defend themselves when they need to. But it's like these kids are taking over your power and getting you to fight and getting you into trouble. And I know it seems like a miracle moment, but it kind of was. He never fought again at school. So I want to talk today about how to work with kids who get, very angry, who tend to be reactive, and get often physical, and then get themselves in trouble. So that's where we're going today. So the thing is, boys and girls. I'm going to talk about boys today, but these issues really go across gender and gender identity. But let's talk about boys. That particularly boys, I think, get very contradictory messages about anger, aggression, and self-defense. On the one hand, they typically hear from parents, although not always, and teachers for sure, and other professionals in their lives. Anger is bad, aggression is bad, don't fight, even in self-defense. So if you're getting bullied, and you see this even in the professional psychology literature, advice to parents and teachers and kids, go tell the teacher. Well, anybody who has done that as a kid, gone and told the teacher about the other kids who were bullying, you got to know that just makes the situation worse. It's good advice at a certain level, and maybe at some point you encourage the kid, and maybe with the parent or parents, to talk about what's going on in the school with aggression and teasing and bullying. But in the moment, if a boy says, well, I'm going to go tell the teacher, there are all sorts of insults that fly out after him as he's running to the teacher, and not so great. So there are other solutions here, which I'm going to be presenting with you. So again, the contradiction is, on the one hand, kids are getting messages it's bad to feel aggressive, to feel angry, to want to fight. And then they're getting lots of messages too, from video games, from TV shows, also from movies, of course. All these films, the Marvel films and DC films and et cetera, et cetera. One man, and one man only saved the world. And then boom, bang, boom, 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 right? So we see that anger is strength, aggression shows your power, self-defense is necessary. And I think a lot of times boys get very confused. They don't know what to do with these very contradictory messages. And in fact, in a way, they're both true. But we have to help boys recognize, that it is part of being a human being that when you feel threatened, you feel scared, and then very quickly you can feel aggressive because you want to protect yourself. This is a normal thing across species, not unique to humans, that's for sure. And in fact, animals often have better ways to handle these kind of moments than humans do. So we want to be able to validate the feeling rather than say, "Oh no, that's bad. You shouldn't even feel that way." And then the question is like, what do you do? What do you do in a moment where you're feeling threatened, where you're feeling angry, in a way that takes a stand, but not over the top and doesn't get you in trouble, and as much as possible, does not escalate things. The goal is, I studied martial arts, and my kids even studied it more than I did. And anyone who's studied martial arts or have had kids doing it, that the whole philosophy of Eastern-based martial arts is if there's any way to avoid the conflict, that's your first move, is to not be aggressive. And I think that's a very important message. Whether a kid is formally taking martial arts or not, that idea of like seeing that you have some power, but you want to use it judiciously. Again, continuing on with this theme, the contradictory messages that boys receive about anger, aggression, and self-defense. Kids are being taught to regulate or modulate their anger, their aggressive feelings, and get in touch with their vulnerable feelings. Fine, it's good. I teach that to adults too. I teach it to kids for sure. But there's another dilemma here, which is quite a bit of research by Thomason and others, recent research showing that both fathers and mothers discourage boys from expressing those feelings, particularly the vulnerable feelings. The aggressive feelings tend to get encouraged in boys, not so much in girls. There are gender differences in how we raise boys and girls. But with boys, the vulnerable feelings are not held as much and not validated. When boys get hurt or scared, they don't generally get a response of like, "Oh, what happened? Come here, I'll give you a hug." It's kind of like, "Get up, you'll be okay." Whereas girls, on average, tend to get a much more soothing kind of response. So boys are not getting a chance to talk about their vulnerability, nor are they getting soothing from parenting figures, caregivers, teachers, and so forth. They're kind of left to do it themselves. So that's a problem. And I think in terms of parenting, we want to encourage our boys as well as our girls to be able to feel vulnerable, to cry, and get out of this, really destructive gendered idea about feelings. Like, what are the appropriate feelings for boys versus girls? Very, very problematic. As I said, boys who were bullied are told by parents and teachers to talk to their teacher. And then that leaves boys often with a reputation for being a weakling, all sorts of nasty words that I don't even want to say, a tattletale, and so forth. And then to say they also are getting a lot of modeling about aggression as power and excitement, and the need to fight right away. And, you don't even stop for a second. You go and you defend yourself, and hopefully you win. So those are all confusing things. So my approach here is again, it can be girls too, but we're talking about boys. So accept that boys view aggression as power. They do, even when they're little. I mean, My wife and I are very peace-loving people. We never modeled any kind of aggression. And we have two kids who are now 24 and 26. My son is 24, Noah. And I just had to laugh that, when he was 3 or 4, every stick became a weapon. It didn't happen with Lena. We never modeled that. We didn't show them any kind of aggressive TV whatsoever. Wife is German, and we were watching all this very gentle stuff with puppets and Barbara Papa and stuff. He never saw any aggressive stuff from us. I don't think from anybody at that age, and yet there it was. So that's something we just have to acknowledge, that's there, and accept it. And then the issue is really, when does it make sense to use what I call your firepower, and the different gradations in how we use that firepower, right? You don't have to come out with guns blasting, metaphorically speaking, and getting physical. There are other ways that boys can assert themselves and use that energy, but in a way that is more in control and frankly more effective. So one of the things that they teach you in martial arts, and that I teach all my clients, adults, little kids, teenagers, is mindful practices that many of you probably are familiar with. Mindful breathing. And I also am a big advocate of Qigong. I'm going to show you a little Qigong. And Melissa, we can send my resources for mindfulness practice to the group, or post it on the Ackerman website. It says a lot of techniques, not just breathing, but walking and this Qigong stuff. Qigong, Qigong, is quite similar to Tai Chi. It's a slow moving, mindful movement meditation, and is all about modulating your arousal and getting sort of in control in a very relaxed kind of way. So with kids, I don't say, let's do some mindful breathing. I was a little adult. I talk about super slow breathing, and also super slow hero walking. And you can do this one at home with a kid. So, kids have smaller lungs. So with adults, I say breathe in to a count of 5. With kids, it's breathe in through the nose to a count of 3. Hold the breath for 1 second. Breathe out to a count of 3 and hold the empty. So let's try it. You out there in TV land, video land, Zoom land. So we're breathing in, 2, 3, hold, breathing out, 2, 3. Now this time, notice when you're breathing in, the coolness of the air coming in through the nose. Breathing out, notice the warmth of the air going out of the nose. And as you breathe in, you can say in your mind's voice, I know I'm breathing in. As I breathe out, I know I'm breathing out. So let's try it one more time. Breathing in, 2, 3, hold. Breathing out, 2, 3, hold the empty. Breathing in, 2, 3, hold. Out, 2, 3, hold the empty. So kids will get into this. And one of the things that I also add to the package of techniques here, I usually have one of these right here on my desk, but it's missing. You all probably know these glitter sticks. They're about 11 inches long. They're sometimes called Wonder Wands, and there's a kind of viscous fluid inside them with a lot of glitter, stars and moons and all sorts of stuff. And if you turn it, they come in different colors. You turn it, and the glitter goes down the stick. I buy these in bulk from a company called kaleidoscopes2u.com. These are based in Iowa. Carl is the owner. I've never met Carl, but he always writes me nice little notes. I told him what I do with these things. And so you can give as a therapist, I will give let a kid pick a color that they like, give it as a gift. In psychodynamic therapy, we call that a transitional object, something to keep the therapy and the therapist in mind for a kid. And so teach them the breathing and then watching the glitter go down the stick. So the whole experience is about slowing down and calming down when you are under threat. So if you're being bullied or you feel like you want to get aggressive, the first best thing to do is nothing, is to calm down. There's no rush. And when people rush, they make mistakes. And when kids rush into aggression, that's where things really go wrong. So we want to like calm down, notice your firepower, gather yourself, and come to it just for a few seconds anyway. Another thing that I do, particularly with kids, up till about age 12, actually, is I ask them who's their favorite superhero. Could be Wonder Woman or Batman or Spider-Man, Black Panther. And then if I'm seeing them in person, I'll say, well, try to imagine that Spidey or Black Panther, Wonder Woman are sneaking up on a foe. How would they do that without getting detected? And so I show them breathing in, stepping forward with one foot, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in. And kids love this. About 13, they kind of look at me and say, like, give me a break. But younger kids, where these problems really start, can get into it. And the idea, again, that it's a superhero slow walking is a powerful image for them to identify with. And can combine all these things and carry the glitter stick, the breathing, and the super slow superhero walking. So this whole image and idea of like, gathering your power, but slowing down so you can think through what's going on first. Another is, look, sometimes we show fear. That's exactly what bullies want. That's exactly why they're provoking another kid. To the extent that some of these techniques can help, a kid calm down, that can help them not get, all terribly fearful. Caveat on that, of course, if there looks to be real scary violence coming, kids have a weapon or they're coming at your son, with, real intent to harm. And we have to help kids distinguish that. But in that case, definitely run and go to the teacher, right? I'm not saying be out there and fight every battle. That's safety first. But a lot of what goes on school playgrounds and in classes and all sorts of places, just kind of teasing and this kind of emotional bullying. So if we can help a kid realize that's what's going on, there are some techniques to deal with it that can help them not start trembling and being so fearful. There's also a whole other set of caveats. I'm talking very broad brush here. Kids who are disabled often get picked on more and also may have a harder time defending themselves. So, of course, every kid's situation is different, and I don't mean to ignore any of that stuff. But of course, there are also other issues around race and ethnicity and how kids of color, gay boys, trans persons may be often picked on more, particularly, sadly, by white kids, white boys. So all these things have to be thought about. Every kid is different. Every kid's situation is different. But a lot of these techniques can be amended and used. And certainly those that have to do with calming down and getting centered can be very, very helpful. So then I encourage that a kid, when it's being teased or bullied, rather than freaking out, saying like, "What's up?" So let me tell you how I discovered this and the power of this. You can't tell here, but I'm not too tall. I'm 5'6". I'm a lot thicker than I used to be. When I was a kid, I was skinny and short. Always one of the shortest kids in the class. And my dad we got born in New York City, and then we moved when I was 10. My dad got a job in Boston. I moved to Lexington, Massachusetts, which is a pretty fancy town, but we did not live in the fancy part. We lived in East Lexington, and that time in the late 60s, 70s, it was, working class part of town, and, kind of some tough kids. So I'm in school, the first week in school, and I had even a little bit more of a New York accent than I have now, and came out of class into the driveway and trying to get to the sidewalk to walk home. A group of 20 boys surrounded me and wouldn't let me get to the sidewalk. And I don't know how I just came to this. Maybe I have some inborn physical courage, lucky for me. Even though I was short, I'm like looking around and I said, well, what's up? And they said, here's my Boston accent here. We're going to give you a wedgie. No, the first thing he said is, why do you talk funny? And I'm thinking to myself, who's talking funny? I said, what do you mean? They said, well, you always say man this and man that. And I said, well, that's how we talk in New York. I'm from New York. Oh, huh. Well, we're going to give you a wedgie. I said, what's a wedgie? Oh, and they started laughing. They said, that's where we pull your underpants up and crush your balls. And for whatever reason, that didn't freak me out. I looked around calmly and I said, no, you're not. I'm not going to do that. They looked at me like, huh? What? They didn't do it. These guys ended up being good friends of mine because I think I didn't get scared. And part of me, I think, was probably thinking, well, if they're going to give me a wedgie, they're going to give me a wedgie. Like, I can't, what am I supposed to do? They've circled me. There's no teacher in sight. Nobody is supervising. What's going to happen is going to happen. And something about just staying calm and kind of accepting my fate, and at the same time saying, no, I don't think so. Every new school that I went to, there was a bullying incident, and every time I used some version of this kind of technique. So a little bit of personal experience is sometimes useful in developing some of our techniques, as long as, we also have some research to support them. Recently rewatched the film Arrival, if you remember that wonderful film about aliens coming to Earth, turned out to be very peaceful. And, of course, our military started thinking they're here to take over the world and destroy us and all this, and it turns out not to be the case. What's her name? Amy, wonderful actress. I'm sure you know, can't remember her name. Amy Adams, right, is the lead scientist, and she's a linguist, and she figures out how to speak with these folks from another place. And there's this fantastic quote as I was getting ready to do this short workshop. I thought it was appropriate. Language is the foundation of civilization. It is the glue that holds a people together. It is the first weapon drawn in a conflict. Think about that. It's the first weapon. So again, this idea that there are moments where kids have to defend themselves. That's just the reality. You can't always go running to mom, dad, and the teacher, grandma. So helping kids learn to use their language effectively, first, calming down. This I already described to you out of order. The marionette and the dartboard and the bullseye, very effective techniques. I think parents and caregivers could do it. You don't have to be a therapist to make this point. Another thing that I often do in family therapy with kids struggling with fear, with aggression, anything on the sympathetic fight or flight side of the autonomic nervous system and the social moments, is to have parents and other caregivers talk to their son about how they manage their anger, feeling insulted, dealing with people being critical or mean. In childhood, like what did they do? What worked? What didn't work? And also in adulthood, can be very powerful for kids to hear how parents experienced bullying and intimidation and what they did with it. So I'm remembering a 16-year-old biracial boy, African American, Black and Caucasian white boy, and his African American father, who grew up in the Chicago area. And this is a very well-to-do family, but he, was raised lower income and ended up going to law school and did very well, and had never really had a conversation with his son about dealing with racism. And one of the most powerful sessions that I had with this young man involved the father talking about how he dealt with not just white kids, but also police, walking in his own neighborhood and having with a friend, another Black friend, and having the police come up, which happened multiple times, and saying, like, what are you doing here? And him saying, like, I live here. So how the father was able himself to discover the ability to stay calm, even under fear and being bullied by police, as well as other kids. That was enormously helpful to his son. It was kind of a shy, somewhat anxious kid, and it helped the kid feel like he could be calm, but also stand up for himself without getting aggressive, which was not really in his repertoire to begin with. Another, in family systems, as some of you may know from other presentations, we have multiple theories. We have structural family therapy and intergenerational and cognitive behavioral, psychodynamic, and also an approach called narrative therapy, which really started in the early 80s, coming out of Australia and New Zealand, Michael White and David Epstein, and there are many other narrative therapists since then. And I have found narrative therapy to be an enormously helpful frame and set of practices. And one of them, probably the most creative idea from narrative therapy, is the notion of externalizing a problem. So as a simple example, a kid who, is whether formally actually ADHD or just hyperactive and somewhat impulsive, that's a whole nother topic. A lot of kids diagnosed with ADHD are not truly dealing with the cognitive neuropsychological issue, for another time. But a kid who's having trouble modulating their behavior and sitting and so forth, and various techniques have been used to help him focus and sit, and they're not being that effective. Sometimes useful to have the kid and the family give the problem a name. So for instance, I've had kids call it the hurricane, or the jumping monkey. One kid said he feels like jumping monkey comes and takes him over and starts getting him to jump around, or the hurricane spins him around. And there's something very interesting that happens when we give a problem a name, whether it's depression, behavioral problem like that, couple conflict. I work a lot with highly distressed couples on the brink of divorce. Giving a name to the problems that they are experiencing helps to separate it from core self and recover one's strength and sense of efficacy and pride. So a kid who gets overwhelmed by hurt and anger, and particularly anger or impulsive tendencies to act out on that, we can encourage the kid with the family support to give the problem a name. And then once almost like it's a creature or a being that comes and takes over. So there's a lot of imaginativeness here. And I'm actually my latest book and also currently writing a paper on the importance of capturing the imagination of our clients, of the people that we work with, that we get them excited about the process of change and also different ways of viewing themselves. So one of the beauties of externalizing is that it has this creative and somewhat playful idea, giving a problem a name. Okay. But it's very effective because the basic idea is going to separate your core self, which can make better choices for yourself, from these parts of self that tend to take over. As I say, parts of self, there's a lot of, for those of you who are familiar with Dick Schwartz's work on internal family systems, there's a lot of overlap here. Wonderful work. I've written blurbs for his books, big admirer of Dick and IFS. But the same idea that there's a core self, there are parts that kind of take over and sometimes get us in trouble. And how do we help those parts? Name them, see them, name them, and then ask them to step back. So risk can be very helpful with kids who really get overwhelmed and get aggressive, way too quickly and not use their firepower. Their firepower uses them. Yeah, look at that, Melissa. Are you proud of me? I got through the whole darn PowerPoint. I can't believe it. Okay, so we got time for Q&A here. We actually have some time.
Great job.
Thank you.
We have some questions that have accumulated, so this is perfect. One of the questions is, how can we cater our language as parents to de-escalate reactionary, angry behavior?
Say it again. How can we what?
How can we cater our language as parents to de-escalate reactionary, angry behavior?
Oh, okay. Great question. Is that Katya? Is that who's speaking? Or is
Well,
that
it's an anonymous attendee.
Oh, anonymous. Okay. Well, look, it's
mysterious.
Mysterious. Okay, person of mystery. Yeah, no, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this presentation is just trying to get kids to push down, dismiss, put away angry feelings, aggressive feelings is bound to fail. That will fail. And the reason that it fails is everything I said at the beginning. First of all, it's a natural part of being a being, not just a human being, of being any kind of living thing. Protozoa probably have angry reactions, defense, like we defend ourselves when we feel attacked. That's fundamental to the nervous system. That's the role of the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system. So to deny that because we're peace-loving people is the wrong approach. The right approach is to say, yeah, of course you feel that way. That's your firepower. That's my point here. That's why I titled it that way. You have a firepower. You have that energy. So, yeah, you have it. The question then is, how do you use it effectively and in a way that harms as few people as possible? We don't want to have harm. We don't want to have harm. So that's where language comes in, taking a stand, all the things I talked about, not trembling if possible, but even if trembling, saying, you guys are scaring me. I don't like it. That's okay. And kids might surprisingly say, oh yeah, you're a sissy or something like that, but then walk away. So the point is, we don't want kids. The whole point of my talk is we don't want kids like Ronnie, my case that I was talking about, to come out guns blazing, right? We want them to calm down a little bit, take a few seconds, and then use the least amount of firepower as possible, starting with language, like I did. Like, you want to give me a wedgie? I don't even know what that is. No, I don't. You're not going to give that to me. And like that was enough. Surprisingly, I have other examples where I had to up it a little bit, but that was enough. So we want to name it. We want to acknowledge that aggressive feelings are normal, but we want to be in control of those. We want kids to develop control. You can't control something that you can't acknowledge. The first step is to acknowledge it. Then all those tools that I just shared come in. Hope that helps. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, our next question is, when my child tells us that when he does not get what he wants, it feels overwhelming and he gets very angry. I believe he has an issue with not being in control, and placing demands on him is a trigger. Any advice?
How
We do it.
old?
Yeah, there's some more information.
Oh,
We
okay.
do acknowledge his feelings, but also explain why X needs to happen or get done. Age 7, boy, severe ADHD, level 1 ASD.
Okay. Yeah. So he's got some challenges there, but I've worked with so many kids with, true ADHD and also, analogic ADHD in the sense of similar, but not as severe. I think this is probably advice that you've gotten before, so pardon my redundancy. Certainly the first thing is to empathize with your son's feelings. Like, oh, that's hard. You get really frustrated when we ask you to do stuff. I get it. I get it. But look, some things just got to get done. And I don't know what the issues are, but like, you got to come to the dinner table without us calling you a million times, or you got to get your book bag in order before school. I think sometimes I've seen, working with families, kind of a tendency to feel like any kind of limit setting is somehow crushing down the soul of a kid. That's not true. From a neuroscience point of view, and also from a psychological, social point of view, I often say to parents, the two main jobs of being a parent are soothing our kids, helping them feel taken care of and loved and calmed when they're upset, and saying no, setting some limits, not in a wanton kind of way, but because, for instance, I remember a couple I worked with and their kids, the kids were like 5 and 3, and the parents had like 7 choices for breakfast, completely overwhelming. So, and then they'd have all these arguments about things, and then they had to set limits instead of just having less stuff to choose from, and just saying, look, you got to eat breakfast now. And we don't have time to get into a whole thing on how to take away privileges if kids misbehave and give them incentives, basic behavioral family therapy stuff. Happy to talk about that, Melissa, at another time. But basically, incentives for doing things without reminding, doing the things you got to do, and avoiding the things that parents really don't want you to do, like clobber your sibling or make a big mess, stuff like that. So setting limits, the key thing is not to throw the spotlight of parent attention on the problem behavior. So I was just lecturing on this yesterday to my class. I can quickly show you an image that hopefully you'll remember. If you've ever saw Bugs Bunny, you'll remember this. Hold on. So Bugs, if you remember, there was always a scene with Bugs Bunny where he'd be out there on the stage and singing horribly, and people would be throwing tomatoes at him, but he would stay up there. Come on, there we go. He would stay up there, right? Even though it's covered with tomatoes, until the light went off. And then he'd say, exit, stage left. So I use that with parents to just make the point that even if it's, quote, emotionally negative attention, like, didn't I tell you what's going on? That kind of what Sal Minuchin, one of the founders of our field, called proximal parenting, parenting by emotion. You're hurting my feelings. What's going on with you? Why are you doing this to me? This is really problematic. With a kid, you need to sit them down and say, here's what you got to do. Here's what you can't do if they're into here's what's going to happen if you do the things you can't do, like bop your sister in the head, or if you don't do the things you really got to do. Very simple consequences. Don't have to think of it as punishment, but consequences. You get less. You won't get your iPad tonight if you don't sit down and do your homework. Again, it's much more complex in terms of like how you shape kids eventually to follow those kind of things. But setting limits is a healthy thing. And I just want to make the point too that the research shows that between the ages of 2 and 3.5, we have more neuronal connections in the brain than any other time in our lives. And part of why limits are so important is there's a normal kind of so-called pruning that needs to happen. And that setting limits is the parent's job, and also the schools. Like, there's certain things you can't do. You can't throw, your books out the 10th floor window and hope that it hits somebody in the head on, East 64th Street. Not a good idea. That's a long answer to a question, but I hope hopeful.
It was filled with a lot of answers, which I'm sure were greatly appreciated. Okay. In your answer, you referenced a few sibling dynamics. So we have a question about sibling dynamics and the line between rivalry and abuse. So the question is, can you talk about how to recognize physical and emotional abuse and strategies in the family where one sibling is always the target? What's the line between rivalry and abuse, given that it often happens when parents are not present and that the targeted sibling is afraid to tell? Can you identify resources to help?
Sure, that's a very important question. And one book that Melissa actually didn't mention came out of my work at Ackerman with Marcia Scheinberg and Fiona True. So for my first 10 years at Ackerman, from 92 on, I worked with Marcia and Fiona, wonderful colleagues, on a family-based approach to incest. Actually, you're not asking a question about that, but sometimes it was sibling incest. So the whole question of abuse versus normal touching in that case, or rivalry, more the aggressive side that you're asking about, very important. So the first thing is you have to use your good judgment about what you're seeing. So if you're seeing something or hearing about something that makes you anxious, it's probably, all things equal, a good sign that it's something to intervene with. So you have to jump on that and really sit down with both kids, but particularly the sibling who is saying cruel things or sort of, pushing the other, usually younger sibling, around in ways that are hurtful. It's possible, everything's possible, but it's unlikely that a younger sibling will be able to hide that they're being abused or even just roughly treated. That's usually something you hear, you see. Even if you're not around and you have like a hired caretaker, they should be reporting on that. And you're absolutely right. I think that the basis of the question is it's not always completely clear. And sometimes parents take kind of a helicoptering approach, and they don't let siblings work out things or be a little bit physical. I think the main point is if let's start with the emotional stuff. If one sibling is saying very contemptuous, critical things to another, like "you're stupid," "you're disgusting," "you're so ugly," that's got to stop. That's over a line. I would say that's really not cool. So you hear that kind of thing and say, like, no, we don't talk that way in this family. That's not right. You can talk about being annoyed with, but we're not, Jim or Sally or whatever, but no insults, not happening here. And if they happen, that kid's going to get some negative consequences. That has to stop. You don't want the younger kid to absorb that. You don't want the older kid to think they can just say stuff like that and get away with it. It's not cool. We want to treat, anyway, so there's that. The physical piece, it's true, particularly boys, but again, cross gender, issues, wrestling, a little bit of pushing and stuff. I mean, an obvious thing is if a kid ends up, with a mark or really in pain physically from an assault, another moment to say like, no, this is not happening. Negative consequences for the kid who did it. This whole thing about, well, both kids are involved and stuff. Yeah, to some extent, but it's kind of like saying in a couple where there's interpersonal violence, well, the reason the husband smacked the wife was she was, bugging him a lot about doing the dishes. We don't think about it that way. She may be bugging him about doing the dishes, but that's a move that is in excess of being bugged about doing the dishes. So we distinguish in family systems between circular patterning, where both play a role, and then these moments where somebody powers over in a destructive, intimidating, dangerous way. That's a moment to stop that. So again, I'm speaking very generally. If I was working with you, I'd be saying, well, tell me some examples and we'd figure it out together. But that's the general frame on that. There shouldn't be, physical damage or fear on the part of one sibling for another. That's a good sign too. Kids afraid to sit in the car when the parents aren't there, or go on the subway alone with them because they're afraid of their sibling. That's not a good sign. Got to be in touch with the kids and have a culture of family life in which kids can talk to you. Put the phones down. Get off the computer. I think we have to stop in a second here. Do we have one last?
We are close. There's one question that sort of builds off of what you were talking about. The question is, we often hear that the consequence needs to be attached to the behavior. Our son is really hard on his brother, physically and emotionally, but I'm not sure what to connect to that. What really matters to him is his computer, but that's not related. So for a sibling to make a consequence that's related to the...
No, I think they may be, with all due respect, I think they may be confusing or just have heard wrong advice. That's not true, actually. What that you have to find some analog that's related to the behavior they're doing. And what would that be? Like beating up on the kid? No, that doesn't make sense. The key thing with negative consequences is it has to be something that gets taken away that is important and meaningful to the kid. But I would also say, I was just lecturing on this yesterday, not something that is core to their identity. So for instance, I sometimes find parents saying, yeah, we decided to make him skip the soccer game where he's on the team because he did this or that. And I say, no, that's not a good idea, because that means the team's going to suffer. The kid's got to explain himself. Not great. I mean, iPads and computers have so many, wonderful things about them. And one of them is you can take them away as a negative consequence. So, a kid might say, well, texting, excuse me, texting with my friends is core to my identity. And then you can say, well, tonight, because of the way you treated your brother, you ain't going to be texting with your friends or Snapchatting with them. So that's that's different than you're canceling the kid's birthday party or going to another one. That's over the top. So the key thing is, in terms of contiguity, the contiguity question, connection, something happens, on a Thursday, the punishment, the negative consequence should happen by the end of Thursday, if at all possible. That's one principle of behavioral work with families, that you want to have a clean slate in the morning. So, if your kid is planning to, play video games from 8 to 10, but at 6, just before dinner, he bops his brother in ways that are not cool. It's like, okay, well, you know the rules, like no video games tonight. Oh, well, sorry. Deliver the negative consequence in a very matter-of-fact way, because you've gone over the rules with the kid. That's very important. You want to identify not more than 3 behaviors that you want to change with a kid. come up with what the consequences are going to be, not grounded for a week or for the rest of their life. You know, sometimes parents will say, yeah, I grounded him for 6 months and he's like a 6-year-old kid. I'm like, oh, yeah, no, it's a little too much. The negative consequence should end by the end of the day, if possible. And it does not have to be content-wise related to the behavior. I think I'm going to have to run.
Yes. Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you to our participants for your excellent questions. And this will be available on YouTube. Thank you so much, Peter. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
okay, use your firepower well, and peace. This is from St. Francis of Assisi. Peace.
Ah.
I was in Assisi this summer for a conference, and quite lovely. So we all want peace. But St. Francis, actually, it's an interesting story, was a very powerful person. So you hear his story. It was very interesting the way he used his influence and his power. He had a lot of firepower, that St. Francis. And he got stuff done. Great model. Bye.
You can have both. Thank
You can have
you.
both. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.